Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Lost Decades podcast, covering the years 1600 BC to 1570 BC, so 30 years. You know what? I'm not even going to introduce myself this time. We don't have names this episode.
Just the guy on the left.
We're
Or at
just
least I
two
think
guys.
if I'm according to this. So
So I figure we just start with Egypt, but I feel like I don't have much to say, but I just kind of want to do it because we normally start that way. But really, the meat of the episode is going to be in Mesopotamia, or really, I would say more in Anatolia.
yeah.
But
So I do have some to say, but it is more like a preamble, if you will.
okay,
So because we're getting to the 17th dynasty is start because again we're going 1600 to 1570
yeah,
and 1580 the 17th dynasty is coming in and I wanted to bring them up because I mentioned them last time, but the 16th dynasty, which we talked about being only in control of Thebes, essentially a new dynasty comes in 1580, again in that same region, basically only controlling Thebes. And I thought it was interesting because no one's really sure exactly why. There's a lot of assumptions, but it's kind of like what you would expect. So there's a bunch of theories that pretty much cover everything. They're like either the last king of the 16th dynasty didn't have an heir, and so another noble house kind of took up the throne, or there was a violent overthrow of the 16th dynasty by the 17th, which is a rival noble family. There's not much evidence for that. They said because usually you can tell when there's turmoil in the region, if there's war, other things like that, and they
hmm
didn't see any signs of that, but that's a possibility.
right.
The other
Maybe it was a
possibility is
full
that the
transfer.
king of the 17th dynasty just married in to the 16th and then sort of took over because there were only female rulers at the end. Uh,
Imagine all the like books or movies or whatever about these things that you could have written or watched, just all the court drama, like Game of Thrones stuff of Egyptian dynasties and all that. I just love thinking about
I
that.
think that's so funny too, because when we say noble families, most people are thinking, and it's not just Europe, but like most people are thinking like medieval Europe or like
hmm
China during the Tang Dynasty or the Song Dynasty, or they're thinking of like the Middle East with the Abbasid like caliphate and all that stuff. And it's like, no,
Yeah,
nope, the whole noble families quarreling for the throne has been going on. I mean, I guess we've talked about it
and
a lot too, but like in Babylon, in Isin, in the Ur-3 dynasty,
Akkad.
in Akkad, in Egypt, in the
hmm
Hittite Empire, which we'll get to. But it's just funny how it's like, I don't know. I think when people say noble, they think of this more like refined, like modern thing. But it's basically just anyone who has some sort of historical claim to a region. And by owning land, you're an important person.
I think that's just one of the most like annoying but also nice things about learning more about all history is you realize how many movies especially are set in the same five time periods and
Hmm.
settings. It's like you just said, like medieval England, samurais in Japan, or maybe then you get cavemen or something, but you're not usually getting, and maybe you get Egypt, but you're not going to get movies with the Hittites and the Hyksos and all that stuff. But I wish we did. I wish we did.
No, I know. I get why we don't, because I guess it's just most people don't know they exist. Or like, I wish more people did. I'm not saying everyone has to know everything about them. I just wish some of these empire names, not even the kings, just the empire names, more people know. Because even things like Babylon and
Mhm.
stuff, I feel like if you ask a lot of people, they just be like, I feel like I've heard of that, but I don't even know where that is. Like, and I'm not
True.
even saying they could point to it specifically on a map, but just like it's in Mesopotamia, it's in somewhere in Iraq or something. Like, but I feel like most people wouldn't even know that.
But the
Like,
silver lining is that we do get a lot of this stuff because nerds will be really into the Hittites or whatever and learn about it, and then they'll make some sort of video game or movie that has inspiration. They'll use the designs from them, and then so it's even though maybe we don't get direct movies about them, we're still seeing in a sci-fi movie. It's like, oh, they were heavily inspired by Babylon or something. So that's cool.
yeah.
like in
Oh, and
Dune.
so the last thing that they think happened, which is the strongest belief, most consensus, but still is unsure, is that the 16th dynasty was ended by the Hyksos, which again is the 15th dynasty, but they're the ones that have the Canaanite descent. They're the ones that Egypt didn't like in the historical record. Essentially ended the 16th dynasty and put in place the 17th dynasty. Not that they had any connection to them per se, just more, hey, here's another royal family that's more loyal to us. And the only reason people that's more strongly accepted is after the 16th dynasty passed, the 17th dynasty, at least at the beginning, because we're going to talk about the early 17th dynasty, was very, very friendly towards the Hyksos and being like, oh, we're friends, we're trade partners, we're almost allies. In fact, some people thought maybe they were subordinates, some sort of vassal state, but that hasn't really been confirmed. They just noticed that
Hmm.
there was a lot of calm between the rulers, and they were more focused on the Nubians, which ironically pushed up so far. Remember when we talked about the cataracts like several videos ago about how um, in the Middle Kingdom, I think it was the 12th dynasty, was pushing down the cataracts, getting all the way to like the third or the fourth to push Nubia out. Nubia now has already pushed past the first cataract and is coming into full on just
Oh
Egypt
wow.
and conquering it. And the 17th dynasty is able to push them out, but at extreme cost. They talk about, they didn't give exact numbers, but massive losses. They push them out, but at huge amount of losses. And they can't really fortify the area. They're just sort of hoping that killing them is enough to keep them out. Um,
Yeah, I did see
yeah.
that the kingdom of Kerma was, I guess, what was down there in what's later Nubia, but
Mhm.
they would ally with the Hyksos against the Theban
Yes.
dynasty.
They saw them as the bigger threat, which kind of makes sense in
They
just
saw who was the bigger threat? The Thebes?
the Nubians. The Thebians with
Oh,
the Hyksos would team up because they saw the Nubians as a bigger threat. So it's sort of like even though they didn't like the Canaanites and them ruling northern Egypt, they just were like, yeah, we can't have these Nubians coming up in here. What's that all about?
I
So
do think it worked both ways though, because I read that the Hyksos up north would ally with Kerma against the Theban
oh, that
kings.
would happen sometimes too. We talked about that
Yeah.
last episode too with the 16th dynasty because again,
Right.
it's the same Theban lineage, mainly to isolate Thebes because they didn't really control much, so they couldn't have much trade. They couldn't really use the Nile because they can't go down past the first cataract. They can't go north into the delta, so they're just kind of like there. And like we talked about, mountains on one side, desert on the other. Your rivers cut off north and south. You're kind of just like, I guess we're just here, sorta.
Yes, and also, I don't know if you saw this. I mean, I guess you kind of know to a certain extent, but this guy, almost the first, was likely already born during this period. It seems like he was born during the 1580s.
Oh, really? Okay.
And he would eventually, spoilers, he's going to expel the Hyksos and found the new kingdom.
True, but that's why I set up another teaser then. The first one to start it, that's the guy who finishes the job and starts the new dynasty. But the first one to start
Oh,
it
okay.
is, wow, this, again, I heard this name several times, but it is hard to pronounce. Sequenere Tau.
Okay.
Um,
So, Quinere
he,
Tau.
again, he's from 1558 to 1554, so it's past this, so we'll talk about it next time. But he's the one to reignite the whole Thebes will not be living under the thumb of the Hyksos in the north. We're gonna reconquer. So he's able to rally the noble families and the royal houses underneath him. But we can talk about it more next time. But yeah, that's he's the start of it, and we'll get into why it leads to the guy you mentioned.
Did you see this thing where at some point the Hyksos king Apophis complained that the hippopotami in Thebes were disturbing his sleep,
That's
and that
funny
kind
because
of
I also
led
didn't
to
know
a war.
the plural hippopotamus was hippopotami.
Yeah, it's Greek. It's like
No, no,
octopi.
but wouldn't that be the opposite? Sorry, I read this today. They said that's why octopus isn't octopi, it's octopuses because octopus
Yeah.
is a Greek word and they don't use the pi as a plural.
Well, we'll never know. But
This is important. Well, you can have us debate this in our linguist podcast. That definitely is a real thing.
I wish
So
I need to give me a second, but I do like that. I do forget that rhinos, or sorry, not rhinos. hippopotamuses are in Egypt.
Oh no, I just remember that because they kill more people than Nile crocodile. So that's why I remember that, which is crazy. I just know that I don't remember when they went extinct, but in early Egypt they had cranes or like, big birds that were big enough to eat people. Now, granted, did they eat people that much? Probably like almost never, but like they were capable of it.
And I just think it's cool to think about that while all this Egyptian stuff is going on, you got to also remember there's hippopotamuses and cranes and crocodiles all just like running around and like among all this Egyptian stuff. So
Yeah, it's
important to
crazy.
remember. Important to remember.
I mean, their boats were made of mostly wood and straw anyway, so it's still kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
It is crazy, right? Imagine fighting a hippopotamus and you're in a straw boat and you have like a spear. That would be
You're like, we got this.
yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know, apparently, yeah, hippopotamuses are like the most dangerous animal, like in the
Yep.
world or something, is like a hippopotamus.
And funny enough, I was at the zoo, technically the wild animal park, or
Hmm.
I guess technically the safari park the other day,
Ah,
and they were talking about how water buffalo are like extremely dangerous too, and I was not aware of that. Like, don't get me wrong, I didn't think they were like
makes
docile,
sense.
tame animals. They just said they're
Yeah.
highly aggressive, and I was like, oh, I was unaware of that. I did not know that water
Hmm.
buffalo were extremely aggressive and known for lots of deaths.
Yeah. Well, the more you know. Um, well, did you know that the Hyksos introduced new weapon styles like composite bows, improved daggers, and certain types of battle axes, and that
I
really changed the warfare?
It's crazy because I knew about the daggers, but not the battle axes and composite bows. For some reason, I thought composite bows were like a much later thing. I had no idea that was like a thing back then.
Yep. So the arms race has this is kind of I feel like I guess the arms race has already begun because we had stone and then we've upgraded to bronze at this point. Or we had copper and now we're at bronze. But we're starting to get new developments in weaponry as these civilizations are encountering each other more and doing more warfare.
What I thought was interesting too is reading about it's a slight tangent, but how, we think of like bronze as the main thing, and it is, but ironwork and steelwork and stuff like that did exist. It was just so difficult and hard to produce. It was more seen as like a luxury thing for kings, like where they would make like an iron scepter or like a steel ball or something like that and just like give that to the king. It wasn't strong enough to be like, oh, we can actually make weapons and buildings out of this.
Well, this is something we won't get to for about a decade in real life. But it reminds me of the Byzantines, around let's say like 1200 or something, or even like maybe 1100. They would have like elevators or like weird like metal lions that could like roar or like they had weird mechanisms that could like do things that seemed like kind of magical, but it's like, well, if you think about it, they have a bunch of money and like they have a bunch of smart people and they figured out how to do these like complicated weird like gears and stuff, and it's like you don't really need electricity for a lot of stuff if you can
Yeah.
actually do it. So I love things where it's like, oh, only kings had it, but they were super ahead of their time.
Yeah.
Well, before we leave Egypt, yeah, I don't know. Actually, that's all I really had. I saw some royal tombs were surprisingly modest, which kind of makes sense. They're not at Egypt's not at its peak. It's basically having a civil war, if you want to call it
Oh,
that.
fun
And
fact about Egypt before we leave. I wrote it down.
yeah,
I thought it was interesting. So the 17th dynasty is the people who started, the Valley of Kings, right? They were the first
Mhm.
ones to start burying people there.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
all of the 17th dynasty kings are actually at the entrance, what we consider the entrance of the Valley of Kings, which would lead to the 18th and 19th dynasty burying all their kings there. There might be further dynasties. I just know for sure the 18th and 19th buried them there. But
That is interesting because I think it was last episode is when I first kind of realized that that's where the Valley of the Kings was when I was sort of talking about how they were two separate kingdoms.
yeah,
So it's cool. They started it.
and they
And
they
that's
started
a
it.
famous tourist attraction.
I just think it's really cool. So yeah, let's move on to the Hittites.
Yes, I feel like this Hittites are the main characters of this episode, and this is the gates of Hattusa, which is
Yeah,
pretty
I think it's
sick.
crazy that it's still, I guess, still there is with an asterisk, but like there's still something there. I don't know. It's cool.
I mean, for I don't know if this is exactly like from the year 1600 BC, but I don't think it's that much later. Maybe it's like 1300 BC, but I mean, clearly it's a recent photo, and the fact that not just oh yes, like stone hammer survived, but this like sculpture of a sphinx or whatever it is, these two sphinxes and like a gateway. If you're listening, I recommend there's a couple of videos on YouTube that there's at least one in particular that he like recreated Hattusa.
Oh, I've
And
seen
I
that.
recommend checking it out. It was actually really sick. And I hope more people do stuff like that where they like show what it would really have looked
I
like, and
mean, I've
maybe
seen
I'll
stuff
put it in
like
the
that for
podcast.
Rome, which I know Rome is so overdone, but all I mean is Rome in its heyday when it had like a population of like 1 million people, which is unheard of. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
crazy to see what it looked like.
Oops,
So,
I got a couple of Egypt pictures snuck in here. One second. Egypt, pretty good before. There we go. All right, back to the Hittites. So yeah, the Hittites. As we said before, it's what's confusing. Before the Hittites, there was the Hattusa, and then the Hittites like kind of invaded them, and then sort of just became the Hittites.
because again, at the
Or-
time, they referred to themselves as the Hattusa. That's the Hittites is more of a modern term. They referred to themselves kind of like Rome, where
Sorry,
their
not the
capital.
Hattusa. There were the Haitians. The
Yes.
Haitians had been there, and the Hittites came and attacked the Haitians, and the Hittites sort of took over. But that was before. Anyway, we're the Hittites are up there, and I think I have a map here somewhere. Yep. And when we say Anatolia, it's modern day Turkey. It's or some people call it like the old timey way is Asia Minor.
Oh
It's
wow,
just
I haven't heard that
that.
term in a while, but that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I feel like that's how we learned in like the 90s textbooks. It's like Asia Minor, but it's just
Yeah.
this thing sticking out in the between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. But that's basically where the Hittites are, is like in the smack dab like middle of that. And as we said, Babylon wasn't doing too hot, and there was the Anatolian king
Well, that's
Mirsili
why
the first.
that's what I was going to say. Did we want to get
Yeah,
into him a little bit? Because I know we kind of
tell us
dabbled in
about
him
him. Yeah.
the last
Well, we
episode,
said right. We said he had attacked Aleppo. He had like sacked Aleppo, which is kind of in like right
which
here,
was
that
also
like
his
area.
grandfather's dream. Because I think we talked about it a little bit. Remember, Hattusili the First didn't trust his sons and his siblings because they plotted against him, so he gave the throne to his grandson, which ended up
Right.
working
Yes.
out because you got to think with everything going on, you'd almost expect it not to.
Yeah,
But his
his
grandson did
grandson
great. Yeah,
Mirsili.
took and so he took Aleppo, basically got rid of Yamhad, completely eliminated them. But he had heard so much about the great city of Babylon and that it was weak. And again, you got to think, even at this time, because it's recent enough memories, a lot of people knew about Hammurabi. He was such an important figure that people were
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, the city of Hammurabi, like we can march down there and we can capture it. Like, I think we can. They marched 1,200 miles, which still blows my mind because that's far in modern day. But imagine we're talking, you know, 1500, 1600 BC, and they're marching 1,200 miles down the Euphrates River and just straight up
And
conquered.
succeeding. Like not only are they doing
Yeah,
it, but it's like and they successfully sack a city, like a major city.
yeah, they literally
Yeah.
take it. And the funny thing is, even historical scholars and stuff like believe that they knew there was no way they were going to hold it. They kind of were just like it was sort of like a symbolic, metaphoric victory. Like, hey, these guys were the most powerful, dominant force. We're trying to show that Hattusa is like the new player in this game, and so we took Babylon, but they essentially sack it. Take a bunch of stuff, including the giant statue of Marduk, which will come into play later, like next episode. But they take the
Hmm.
statue of Marduk and they leave, and they're essentially like, "All right, bye, Babylon."
And I saw like, no one really knows. Like, even you'd think this would be such a major um, moment for the Hittites, which it is. And there's actually in Civilization 3, I think, there's a character named after Hattusili.
No way. Because
Or no,
again, I
sorry,
didn't
after
explain it
Mirsili, after
before, but that
Mirsili.
still blows my mind.
Mirsili the first is a playable leader as the Latinized form Mercilus of the Hittite state in the 2001 video game Civilization 3, which
That's
is cool.
crazy.
But if you look at his Wikipedia page, it's super short. It's just like we know he sacked Babylon, and then that's what caused the Kassites to take over. So that's the interesting thing is it seems like there's three possibilities. He either just wanted power and wanted to show how awesome he was, which is probably no matter what, that's like the main reason. Just be like, I'm powerful. The second thing is maybe he was somewhat allied, or the Hittites were allied with the Kassites, and then also maybe he was just trying to show off, like that he was better than his grandpa, and just be like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go really far away.
No, it makes sense. I mean, and to be fair, he made his point. The only thing that sucks is, again, what we'll get into is he straight up comes home because he hears there's unrest at home, only to get murdered by his son-in-law. Yeah,
Talk about like a movie. Like this would be such a good movie. It's like he's this conqueror. His grandpa was like this powerful warrior, and he goes and he conquers Babylon and he like destroys it, and then he just takes everything, comes back, and it's like, oh my God. And it's kind of seems like it's like a horror, like not a horror movie, but it's like, oh my God, the bad guy's gonna win, but then he gets like immediately killed by his, yeah, what, his brother-in-law or what? His,
is I thought it was, yeah, his.
I
Oh
don't
no,
know.
it is his brother-in-law. You're right.
Is
I
it?
apologize. I thought it was his
It's
son.
always the brother-in-law. It's like, wait, why brother-in-law? Like, it's, I
Well,
guess
speaking of
because
that,
you don't
we'll
know each
get
other
to it
that
in a
well.
later episode, but it's funny
Yeah.
that this causes a chain reaction that, again, it's one of those things that you can see why people are religious because they think by him doing this, it essentially created a curse. Because after
Oh
that, the guy
wow.
who killed him, who took over, was Hantili the First, and he was the royal cupbearer, but married the sister of Mirsili the First. And essentially, well, not to jump the gun, but he is also assassinated by his son-in-law. Um, and it kind of leads to
Wow.
this endless coup of people killing each other. But to just get into a little bit of
Man,
Hantili the First, there's not a
like
lot
an
about.
ancient curse. That is like, that's so cool.
Yeah, I mean it sucks, I guess, for everyone involved, but it's kind of like a
Right.
cool thing, and it makes you realize that that's why they were so believable in this religion because they're like, wait a minute, so you assassinated this guy, your brother-in-law, and then you end up assassinated by your son-in-law, who ends up assassinated by his son-in-law, and it kind of creates this chain reaction.
Did we say his
Um,
name? He gets assassinated by his brother-in-law, Hentili, and an accomplice named Zidanta.
and that's what's crazy is Austin. Guess who kills Hantili? Zidant.
Zendala? Oh, Zidanta?
Zidant
Wow.
ends up killing him.
Yeah.
Um,
Hello, Spielberg?
yeah, I know, right? I'm trying to imagine writing in a script. You're just like, hey, have you heard about this? Have you heard about Marsili and Hantili, who gets ended up
Yeah,
betrayed and killed by his son-in-law Zadantha?
they might have
It's
to
like,
change the
it's a
names.
crazy
Like
story. George
Steve.
R. R. Martin, you don't need to do War of the Roses. You need War of the
Yeah.
Hittites.
Hey, maybe if the Odyssey does well, they'll make
Yeah.
the Sully Odyssey. I don't know what they'd call it.
And then, funny enough, to go into that, it's unsurprising that these murders and stuff that keeps going back and forth causes the Hittite Empire to just be hemorrhaging territory. Um,
Right. That's the thing is you think, oh wow, this is gonna be like the beginning of like the real Hittite like power, and it's like actually this is literally one of their worst, darkest ages. Is it's technically just called the Middle Kingdom, but it's like they're at their weakest.
and we're essentially, they don't call it this, but to use Egypt as a parallel, we're like entering their intermittent period where they're just like
Yeah.
murdering each other and like taking the throne, which will lead to something greater. But for now, it's just that.
I
And
think there's
so,
actually kind of like a really good lesson in there somewhere where it's like this whole classic story of like the conqueror goes in, he conquers this famous city, he loots it, he's super successful, he comes back, and then it's like then his kingdom falls apart, and the kingdom he sacked actually ends up in sort of a golden age. Like when the Kassites take over, they actually then rule for like 400
400
years.
years. Yeah, that blew my mind. But they were the
So
longest
crazy.
ruling dynasty in all of Mesopotamia. Isn't that crazy?
It seems like it'd be one of those things like I forget their names now, but when some of these other people is like, oh yeah, they ruled Babylon for, 60 years, but then we don't really know much. Like the Gutians. I remember the Gutians ruled for a little bit. Or like the Sealand, and it's like, oh yeah, then the Kassites rule Babylon. It's like, oh, that was probably a footnote in history. Yeah, for 400 years. Like,
Not only that, I think it's so funny that when we hear about like the golden age of Babylon, the golden age of Assyria, the golden age of the like Sumerians and all this stuff, it's always like the second time around they do better. Like I realize the Hittites, their golden age is the Neo-Hittitian Empire. The golden age of the Sumerians is the Neo-Sumerian Empire. The golden age of Babylon is the Neo-Babylonian Empire, and the golden age of the Assyrians is the Neo-Assyrian Empire. It's funny that all of these guys like get their start and can't quite get it going, and they fall apart. And then someone comes back later and is like, "Hey, wait a minute! I know how to do this actually better." And that's why we know who they are. Like, had someone else come in, it doesn't make any sense, but like some Alexander the Great figure way early and conquered all this stuff, there wouldn't be all these neo empires, and we wouldn't actually know any of these people because the first Babylonian Empire didn't last very long. The first
wasn't.
Sumerian Empire did not last very long. The first Hittite Empire did not last very long. It's just really
Yeah.
funny. Like,
It is weird. It weirdly, because I guess it kind of makes sense because countries are just made out of a bunch of people, but it's like it weirdly seems like with people where someone does something like we're saying all the time, where some guy does something great and then his son or his grandson is the one that actually does it better, like Alexander the Great or the even this Mirsili guy. And it's like the country itself is like that, where it's like, oh yeah, we had a whole empire, but then 500 years later, we're gonna have the Neo Empire, and it's gonna be way more sick.
yeah. Indoor plumbing, it's gonna be
But it's
big.
good. It's a good lesson again. But this is an episode of good morals because it's also a lesson that, at first you might not fully succeed, but you just got to try again, and you do better
Yeah.
next time.
Because again, all
Gotta
this
start
infighting,
somewhere.
Hattili the First. The only other things I have are he tries to expand into Syria, gets raided a bunch and loses the territory. They lose a bunch of crucial frontier cities. They even lose their major religious city of Nerik. And then he gets,
Uh-oh.
while he's an old man,
Eric!
live that.
No!
It's so
Eric!
important. It is funny because we mentioned how much Sipper was so important, and then it's like, oh, the important city of Nerik, and I'm like, oh god,
Yeah,
I
who
need a
cares?
T-shirt that says
Boo.
"Remember Nerik, remember the Nerik."
Remember Eric? That would be funny actually to just get really invested in like ancient like skirmishes and stuff and become really upset about this.
And yeah, so then he gets murdered by Zentanta the First, his co-conspirator, and then he dies. It's weird. It's just weird that it phrases it this way when I was looking up stuff about it. It says he was murdered by his son-in-law and then died shortly thereafter. And I was like, yeah, murder tends to kill you. Like that's kind
Yeah, murder has a pretty high kill rate.
of
Yeah, he was murdered, but he survived.
yeah, which I
Um,
would. That's why I'm just saying. Like I even wrote that on the thing. I put like murdered, and then I put and then died later. I put it in parentheses. So
yeah,
it's
you're
like
like murdered question mark. And then yeah, I guess, like the Kassites, just to start with them, I think maybe next episode we'll go into them. And as you know, we can take our time because they have 400 years to kind of ease in. They don't
we don't know
immediately,
really
it's not
how
like
they
this.
took
What?
over. That's the weird part. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Is the more I was trying to do research on like their first king and all this stuff, it's all question marks. Like they're not really sure
Yeah.
exactly what happened.
I
They just
think
know that it happened.
my guess is just, he completely destroyed the city. So probably, I'm assuming that means barely anyone was even there or like they fled. So then when they came back, maybe the Kassites just sort of like were like, well, we're in charge now, and there was no one really to fight back. It was just like all the soldiers were dead.
Well, and interestingly enough, it's the Kassites were pretty integrated at this point. Not completely, because again, they were distinct enough to be Kassites and not seen as Babylonians. But the only things I could really find is that they'd spent the last 100 years kind of integrating themselves a little bit, not with the goal of taking over, to be fair. And then they sort of just saw this opportunity, and one of their leaders was like, "All right, we're just going to do this." It kind of reminds me a little bit of the 15th dynasty, where it's all
The
the
Hyksos.
Canaanites in Egypt being like, "Hey, we're kind of like, do you notice how like everyone around us is also a Canaanite? Why are we not in charge?" I feel like that's kind of what happened to the Kassites. They're like, "Well, a lot of us are here, and we're kind of like running things. Why are we not
Mhm.
ruling this place too?"
Makes you realize just how fluid everything is with like history. You think of it as like this stable thing, but even Egypt, it's all these random groups are like taking over.
that a lot of things almost are an inevitability. Like a lot of things aren't, but it's sort of
Hmm.
like when their culture starts to dominate the region, it'd be almost surprising that they don't rule. You know what I mean? So,
And yeah, just to say the Kassites, you can see them on this map. They basically just came. It says from the Zagros Mountains, which is also what they always say about Elam. So I'm assuming the Zagros are just really big, and the Kassites seem to be more in the northern, like northeastern Zagros, and then
Mhm.
Elam is more like southeast mountains. But that's a theme, a running theme you're going to hear a lot about is things are seeming kind of like stable in like the lowland, like river valley area. Like, I wonder what's this is kind of chill, I guess, but a little boring. And then it's like, oh my God, people riding horses are coming down from the mountains, from the steppe. This is crazy. I feel like I might say those words again in a future episode. So, I don't know. That's really all there is to say, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, again, I tried to do a lot of research because I thought there'd be a lot to talk about the Kassite takeover, but all the research I did was basically people being like, I mean, they took over. We're not 100% sure how, but they made up a large cultural presence, so they kind of just were in charge now, but like we don't know when they took over and how long they reigned for. We do know the 400
yeah.
years, but in terms of individual kings, they're like we have names, but we don't have year names in terms of how long they ruled and what they were doing. Just sort of that
And
they were
just to
there.
reiterate, though, that the Hittites traveled 500 to 700 miles to get there. So I just feel like that's really the main point of this episode is just that happening is
Yeah.
crazy. Even though we don't know much else, it's just like we know enough that something pretty incredible did happen. So that's I feel like if we have an episode either that covers a lot of bases, I'm happy, or if we have just one good story, I feel like that's solid. You know, if there's like some like Gun Gun'em or something,
Yeah.
I'm satisfied. So I'm trying to see if there's any pictures I sort of missed. I have some of these from the Poverty Point. Did you learn anything else about like Poverty Point or China
I didn't go
or?
too much. I mean, the only stuff I had about China was I just wrote a few things down about their because their dynasty is kind of split into two areas, and we sort of talked about it a lot. But I was just looking more at King Tong of Shang. He had he was born Zilu, Zilu. I don't know. I'm practicing Chinese, so I'm getting better at it. But
Hmm, nice.
I didn't realize too that a lot of the early Shang is considered like mythical, kind of like the Xia dynasty, because
Hmm.
a lot of them are sort of just like almost too good to be true, where it's sort of like, oh, he took over and he won, and not only did he win, all the slaves and all the families joined him, and then he took all the money and he gave it to the poor so they could buy back their family as slaves. And that, in fact, one of the things I wrote down I thought was so funny was that they said that he refused to be king three different times, and they said 3,000 different noble families came and said you need to be king, and he said no, I won't do it. And then on the third time he was like, you know what, guys, I'll do it. Like, you really want me to be, I'll be king and in charge of everything. But this dynasty did
Times the charm.
exist. These people did exist. It's just more that almost like with modern history, with again using America from that's where we're from, where the founding fathers are kind of given almost this mythical status of larger than life people. And I feel like that's kind of what happened here. That they're just like, he was just so incredible. Apparently, a famine came afterwards during his reign, and he prostrated himself on the altar and begged the gods for rain. And that's when he got his divine right. And the rains fell down, and
Hmm.
all the plants started to grow again. And it's like, yeah, I can see why people think that a lot of this is kind of made up.
I don't know what you're talking about. Um, I have something I might look into more next episode. There's apparently a huge city in modern Pakistan called Dolavira,
Hmm.
and it was actually, I guess, just part of the Indus Valley civilization. But just one thing about it is that it was a big city, but there's no evidence of giant royal palaces. So it's basically whenever they find something like that, it's like, well, there's no palaces, then it basically makes you think that there probably really wasn't much of like a hierarchy. It was just sort of like a bunch of people living together. So it's always, I always think that's interesting that what that would be like to live in a civilization like that. And apparently
Uh,
that was going on in Dolavira.
Deliver.
And we already talked about Kerma, but maybe I'll talk a little more just from their point of view, like what they've been up to lately. But they're the Nubians that are, because they're doing pretty well right now, right? Like we were saying, they
Yeah.
have been fighting up into Egypt. Oh, this one I thought was cool. And I've known this before, but I just love thinking about the idea that Britain was importing luxury goods from surprisingly far away. So they found evidence in Bronze Age Britain that they were in trade networks that stretched all across Europe. So, like specifically from Cornwall, Cornish tin, the metal tin might have eventually it reached all the way into the Eastern Mediterranean, like this area we've been talking about. So just the idea that someone in Babylon could have been using like a bronze weapon that had tin from Britain is just kind of like Hammurabi, you know? He
Oh,
could have
that
had.
was one thing I wanted to say that was cool about China was they seem like one of the few regions that China had bronze or sorry, they had tin and copper in their dynasty, like the in their region. So they didn't really don't get me wrong, trading was definitely happening, but like they had everything they needed right there, which is just kind of so lucky in my opinion. It's so cool
Yeah.
that you're just like, oh yeah, we've got the tin and the copper, so we're just gonna do our own thing. Like we don't really need to
Some
trade for any
places
of
just get really lucky with their geography, like how the Mississippi River like is the perfect kind of just like transport for things down the middle of the
that.
country. Um, and yeah, I talked about that volcano a couple episodes ago.
With the Minoans.
Yeah, the Minoans. I don't remember it being called this. This thing I'm reading now is saying Santorini, but apparently that eruption, which I believe is what sort of jump-started the Minoans to reach their peak, they kind of rebuilt and had all these palaces, but it also affected other parts of the world, and it was apparently one of the largest volcanic events in human history. So which makes sense. It's not just going to be the islands right next to it that are affected, but
Yeah.
it might have also impacted just like weather, trade, and that then has like knockdown effects. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it had some impact on even this whole Hittite thing. Like, they had some weird weather events going on, so they were like desperate for like resources and
Oh, that's one of the things I actually read. I just didn't bring it up because yeah, it didn't kind of fit. But you bring mentioning that is some people believe, again, it's not a common consensus, that one of the reasons that Mirsili marched all the way down to Babylon is that he heard about their giant fields of wheat and that
oh,
he wanted to take it all and bring it up to Hattusa because they were having a famine at the time. And he thought that, oh my gosh, we can take all this food and just go up. But it was kind of a two birds with one stone. Like I get the prestige of beating Babylon, but also he needed the grain. And he'd heard rumors about they have giant fields of grain and we can just take it all and just bring it back.
it makes sense. It's like because yeah, the Hittite. I was talking about the Kassites earlier, but like even the Hittites, if you look on this map, they're basically mountain people, and they're just much further away. But they're the same sort of like when you're in the mountains, you're gonna have less arable land. You're gonna have less opportunity to like grow crops.
Hmm.
Uh, but you might, be better with horses and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, it makes sense that they would know about the concept that this valley's down there, and they're like, it's kind of far, but if we just commit and we go down there, we're going to be set. And that is one thing about Mesopotamia that I don't know if we've mentioned is that not only do they have kind of like the rivers are a nice situation, they have pretty good like kind of Mediterranean weather, but they also they just naturally have wheat. Like wheat just sort of literally is like a grass to them. Like it just grows in that part of the world. So like
I like the breadbasket of like this modern era or
literally, yeah.
of this um, you know, Bronze Age era because obviously they're growing it everywhere that they can. But that's what made Mesopotamia so incredible was that they
Especially
just kind of
here.
drop seeds on accident and just have a giant wheat field.
Yeah. When you think about it that way, it makes a little more sense. When you picture just this whole Babylon kind of Mesopotamia area, it's like a bottom of like a bowl, like a really big bowl. And then it's
Mm.
like the Hittites are kind of up on one edge and like the Elamites are on the other and all that stuff. And it's like there's some good stuff on the top of the bowl, but every so often they go down in there And there's all these really good, delicious things down in the
No,
at the
I mean
bottom.
it's cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. Well, I think it's getting into a cool point where another transition moment, but we're gonna get to the place where we're in a new kingdom. We'll be out of this wacky like Civil War type period we've been in.
yeah, I mean the intermittent period technically will still be going on next episode, but it will be ending. That's kind of how we decided to end it. We're gonna go to 1550
1750, which is when
because
the new
that's when the
kingdom
18th
starts.
dynasty starts, and
Yeah.
also that's the period where the 17th dynasty starts attacking the 15th. But it's cool because the 18th dynasty, to give a little teaser, again, it's not even next episode, but like that's the one with all the people we knew with like King Tut. Oh, now I'm blanking on so many of the other names, but Nefertiti, all that stuff, the Valley of the Kings. That like the 18th dynasty is what a lot of people think of when they think of
The
Egypt.
new kingdom, or
The New
specifically the
Kingdom.
18th dynasty, not just the new kingdom,
Yeah,
or
well, the New Kingdom's the beginning of the 18th dynasty, and again, they're around for like I think it's 260 years, so they can,
yeah.
which is funny because it's a lot longer than even the Middle Kingdom existed.
Yeah, the
So
middle kingdom is really pretty short
it was. I was surprised. We kind of came in at
at the
not the
beginning.
beginning, but we came in like close to the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, and it sort of we
No, we
just saw
really
it
did. Yeah.
decline and end, and then that was
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
So far we have covered, so we're in 1650, 16, sorry, we're in
15.
1570. So it's hard to do
We're
the math right now, but
approaching 500 years. We're not
500
there
years.
yet.
Well, we should do something once we're in like
26.
1526, I guess. We should do a 500
Yeah, that
year.
won't be next episode, but maybe the one after that. So that would be
Yeah, a
interesting.
couple away from that. And we're on
500
15
years.
right now, which is a solid number.
Yeah.
All right. Well, follow us on Instagram at Lost Decades Pod. A lot of people are on YouTube, I'm realizing, so feel free
I
to
need to
follow
check it
us
out.
on
I need to do
YouTube.
that.
I did get a comment that I actually kept meaning to read. I never ended up reading it, so maybe I'll just read it right now.
I'm literally trying to
You know
pull
what?
up.
I'm just gonna live react to this because I have not read this.
I'm Googling it now.
So this is, I think, our maybe our only comment on this video we posted, Hunter Gatherer's Life Off the Land, which is actually a clip from I think our last episode about Poverty Point. So this guy, Telemarcheology said, okay, couple things. Most early societies that we think of as hunter-gatherers actually practiced a primitive but ingenious form of agriculture we might classify as environmental engineering. They spread seeds, burned brush and/or forests to clear land, and trapped prey species in certain areas until they integrated and settled locally. Some environmental engineering went so far as to create vast earthworks to funnel migration, rainfall, and schooling/flocking behavior to a human community's benefit. Second, most of these people died of tooth decay because somewhere between ages 25 and 35, and an eighth of the women died in childbirth. So the words ideal lifestyle are doing some pretty heavy lifting here. I think that's
Oh
first
yeah.
part I think is interesting. I think that's cool to think about that it's not just a binary like agriculture or hunter gathering. It's like there's kind of a middle ground where you're sort of funneling animals and you're growing stuff. And the Native Americans, I feel like perfected that kind of thing. But also when I say lifestyle, I just mean I'm literally saying like the idealized, like I know it's not a realistic hope.
It's not for
Um,
longevity, to be fair.
Not for longevity, and like yeah, I think if you want to get optimistic about it, you could imagine a world where it's similar, but you still have medical advances and stuff like that. But it is true, we got to remember the mortality rate and the medical care was not, ideal.
Well, and
Imagine
it's
getting
interesting because
surgery.
what he brings up is kind of like early domestication, if you will. You're not really
Hmm.
domesticating, you're just kind of just changing the environment to make the animals more suited to human needs, even though it's very early on. But
I
yeah,
guess so, but I feel like that frames it as like it's progressing towards agriculture, but like you could see it as just like, well, it doesn't, with farming it has all these issues. Like you have to have all these giant fields of wheat and all this stuff. Whereas like if you just kind of like naturally have some nuts growing and you kind of like support so that ducks come to your area so you know there'll be ducks. It's like you're kind of just helping yourself be a hunter-gatherer.
No, I get it, but I just mean early
Yeah.
domestication in that we didn't just capture a wolf and then until it became a dog. We kind of
Mhm.
just would feed them and live around them, and there, we just had more and more in common. We created an environment where the animals needed us more. And so by funneling the
Mhm.
flocks in, leaving food that we know they like, kind of gets them. I know that's what I mean by just early domestication. Where
Especially
they're
with the animals, for sure. Yeah, animals are definitely getting domesticated and stuff. And
Yeah,
plants.
like it's not that
Yeah,
they're intentionally trying to domesticate them. It's almost like on accident. They're sort of just, hey,
yeah. Mhm.
this. I realized when I built these big earthworks, all the ducks land over here, and it makes it easier for us to get them. So,
Mhm. But yeah, that's one thing I heard about. Maybe we'll end it after this, but I remember reading, it might be in that book 1491, but it talks about when the like Europeans landed in North America and they were writing in all their journals, they're like, wow, like everything, it's like literally the Garden of Eden. There's all these, just delicious berries growing in the woods naturally. And like they just live in this like blessed land. Like God blessed this like world for us to come to and all this stuff. But then it's like now we know that all that stuff was basically the Native Americans that had lived there had like done this thing that guy's talking about where like they had just sort of like tilted things in the direction where the berries are just kind of like growing in here
mhm.
naturally, but we're like helping them and all this stuff. It's not quite agriculture, but they're like encouraging it. And then when the first, I guess, Christopher Columbus landed, this the diseases started spreading, so all the Native Americans had already died, and the forest had like started to regrow already. It had been, a certain amount of time, so it seemed completely abandoned and just full of like magical plants, but a lot of it was actually there on purpose. So
Yeah,
I think that's cool to think about. But
yeah. Oh, I
well,
agree.
we covered 47 minutes. I'm impressed. And apologies, I can't believe I forgot to share my screen, which was for the first like 10 minutes, but
It's furious.
forgive me. Forgive me.
This is so dark right now. I'm realizing.
Yeah, we should just redo the episode.
Yeah, let's
Your
just
life
start
is
from scratch.
bad.
I mean,
I'll just end it on the note. I finally saw Backrooms, and don't go in expecting to like cry from an amazing story, but has really cool stuff happen. And also Obsession is extremely scary. If you want to be scared, go see Obsession. All
bro,
right. Well, join us next time. And on your way, ooh, sorry. You
I
know
was
what might
trying to
happen
think of like
when
a example. So are you gonna mention the back rooms or what?
I was just gonna say, you know what you don't want to do in the back rooms?
Let's get lost.
Get lost.